إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. My dear brothers in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So tonight's halaqah is going to be on Imam Abu Dawood as-Sijistani. And I want to start off the halaqah by sharing an interesting story that I read about his sheikh, who was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah ta'ala. So the teacher that Imam Abu Dawood spent the most amount of time with, benefiting from and learning from, was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And it was known through his son Abdullah that Imam Ahmad used to pray over 100 rak'ahs each and every single night, except when Yahya ibn Ma'in used to come and visit. So after Yahya ibn Ma'in left, he asked his father, oh my father, why is it that tonight you didn't pray, the amount of prayer that you usually do? And then Imam Ahmad, he sat his son down and he told him, look, as for the rak'ahs that have been missed, then those can be made up later on. Whereas the opportunity to sit and benefit from a person of knowledge, then that is something that cannot be made up, and that is why that opportunity should be seized at all times. Now this is very befitting, because when you look at Imam Abu Dawood rahimahullah, he had over 300 teachers. Now when you compare that to Imam al-Bukhari, who we mentioned that had over 1,080 teachers, it seems very small. But when you compare Abu Dawood to the rest of his contemporaries, they usually had 15, 20, 30 teachers of hadith at most. So to have 300 is still a large amount of number. And this is part of the motivation that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah instilled inside Abu Dawood. Later on we'll discuss some of the interesting fiqh opinions that Imam Ahmad taught Abu Dawood, and so on and so forth. But let us start off with his name, inshallah ta'ala. So Imam Abu Dawood, his name is actually differed upon. He's one of the few individuals that, even though he was very profound and very renowned, they did not document his name properly. So opinion number one in terms of his name was Sulaiman ibn al-Ash'ath ibn Ishaq ibn Bashir ibn Shaddad ibn Amr al-Azadi as-Sijistani. And it was also said, the second opinion is Sulaiman ibn Ash'ath ibn Shaddad ibn Amr, and it skips Ishaq ibn Bashir it skips Ishaq ibn Bashir at that time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Imam al-Dhahabi said the first opinion is stronger, that from his grandfathers was Ishaq ibn Bashir. Now, in terms of what is Al-Azadi and what is Sijistani, Al-Azadi is one of the pure Arab tribes, and from the Imams that we have discussed, Imam Abu Dawood is the first actually pure Arab from all of the Imams of Hadith that we've discussed. All of the others, they were Musta'arab. They became Arab due to the tongue of learning the Arabic language. And that is where Al-Azadi comes from, Azad being a tribe from Yemen, and that is his lineage going back to the people of Yemen. As-Sijistani, this goes back to where Imam Abu Dawood was actually from, which was southern Afghanistan, very close to the borders of modern day Pakistan. And that is where he was from. As for when he was born, Imam Abu Dawood, he narrates about himself that he was born in the year 202. He was born in the year 202. And in that very narration where he talks about him being born in the year 202, he documents about how he traveled to Iraq for the first time. He traveled to Baghdad for the first time in the year 220. So meaning at the age of 18, he's already traveling to Baghdad. And he says that I arrived in Baghdad with the aspirations to learn from a scholar of hadith, but I learned that he had passed away the day just before. Now, I think about a narration like this and you're like, man, all that effort gone to waste, subhanAllah. You travel the journey of months to go and meet this scholar of hadith, to find out he passed away. When did he pass away? Not months ago, not years ago, but yesterday. That had you just come 24 hours earlier, you potentially could have benefited from this individual. And that's purely the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that what is meant to be will happen, what is not meant to be will not happen. Now, in that trip though, he did end up meeting other scholars of hadith that he did benefit from. And the benefit we're taking from this is that he clearly mentions himself that he was born in the year 202. He was born in the year 202. In terms of his upbringing, he, like the other scholars of hadith, he naturally had a love for hadith from a very, very early age. In fact, this was something that was in his family, that they were scholars of hadith. He had an older brother by the name of Muhammad, who was a scholar of hadith as well. And his son also became a scholar of hadith. Who remembers his son's name? Don't tell me Ibn Abi Dawood, please. Abu Bakr is the kunya. What was the name? Abdullah. Fantastic. That's usually easy, man. All the scholars of hadith have Abdullah or Abdurrahman, right? That's just the way it goes. That's just the way it goes. Now, I want to share with you something interesting about Imam Abu Dawood and his relationship with Imam Ahmad, on how Abu Dawood, he actually resembled Imam Ahmad a lot, not only in the way that he looked, the way he acted, the way he talked, and so on and so forth. So much so that one of the commentators, one of the narrators of Sunan Abi Dawud, whose name is Ibn Udasa, his name is Ibn Udasa, and we'll come to learn more about him later on. He narrates that, and this is Imam al-Dhahabi, quoting this, he says, بلغنا أن أبا داود كان من علماء العاملين حتى أن بعض الأئمة قال كان أبو داود يشبه بأحمد بن حنبل في هديه ودله وسمته، وكان أحمد يشبه في ذلك بوقيع، وكان وقيع يشبه بسفيان، وسفيان بمنصور، ومنصور بإبراهيم، وإبراهيم بألقمة، وألقمة بعبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه. وقال علقمة كان ابن مسعود يشبه بالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في هديه ودله. So Imam al-Dhahabi, he narrates from Ibn Udasa, who says that it had reached us that Abu Dawood was from the scholars that used to act upon the knowledge that they had. And some of the scholars had said that Abu Dawood resembled Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal in the way that he conducted himself and in the way that he looked. Just like Ahmad used to resemble his teacher, who was Al-Waqi ibn Jarrah. And Al-Waqi ibn Jarrah, he used to resemble his teacher, who was Sufyan al-Thawri. And Sufyan al-Thawri used to resemble his teacher, who was Mansur. And his teacher resembled Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, who used to resemble Alqam ibn Waqqas, who used to resemble Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. And Alqam ibn Waqqas, he says that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used to resemble the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his conduct and in his character as well. Then Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, he comments on this by saying, Al-itba' yurithu al-ilm al-sahih al-mubarak, that an individual, when he becomes a follower of knowledge, he will naturally develop the characteristics of the people that he took it from. Now, you can understand conduct and character, but how about even appearance as well? When they're talking about resemblance and appearance, what they're referring to is the light of knowledge on the face of the individual, right? That's the resemblance that they're talking about. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses a person with knowledge that he acts upon, and he blesses him with sincerity, then naturally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place a glare of light upon their faces. Will bless them with a glare of light upon their faces. Who were the teachers of Imam Abu Dawood? Who were the teachers of Imam Abu Dawood? Let's go back and try this again. Let's try to remember the teachers of all the 6 narrators of hadith. Come on. We did this last week as well, if I'm not mistaken. Not last week, but when we did Sunan al-Tirmidhi. Sorry, Imam al-Tirmidhi. Who were the teachers of all the 6 Imams of hadith?
Oh, who taught every single...
Yes. Abdurrahman who? So General Abdurrahman. The famous Abdurrahman. Allahu Akbar.
Sa'id bin someone and
Sa'id ibn Jubair.
Sa'id ibn Jubair, mashallah. See, this is like part of the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not burden us with the protection of hadith. If we were responsible for protecting hadith, we would have destroyed this deen a long time ago. You're close. Qutayba ibn Sa'id. So Qutayba ibn Sa'id taught all of the 6 Imams of hadith. Who else? Sajjad, man, let's go, bro. What's happening, man?
Don't ask questions you don't want.
Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. But I do want the answer to this question. Muhammad ibn Bashar. Muhammad ibn Bashar, also known as Al-Bundar. Right? Al-Bundari. Come on, man. Maybe you should remember that one. Okay? So they taught all the 6 Imams of hadith. All the 6 Imams of hadith. From the particular teachers of Imam Abu Dawood, who some of the Imams of hadith shared with and others didn't, was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, was Yahya ibn Ma'in, Sulaiman ibn Harb. These are some of the famous individuals that you should know when you talk about the narrators of hadith. Now what's interesting is that Abu Dawood, he actually did a comparison between the reason why I was mentioning the 6 Imams of hadith and who their teachers were, I'm going to teach you a third name today as well. And that is Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna, also known as Abu Musa. So in hadith, when you're not talking about Sahabi, but you're talking about famous individuals by the kunya of Abu Musa, this is who it's referring to, Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna. And he was another teacher of all of these 6 Imams of hadith. He was another teacher of all of these 6 Imams of hadith. Now, Imam Abu Dawood, rahimahullah, he did a comparison between Muhammad ibn al-Bashar, who is al-Bundar, and Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna, who is Abu Musa over here. He said Muhammad ibn al-Bashar, while he was a good narrator, he didn't have that many narrations. While he was a good narrator, he didn't have that many narrations. Whereas Abu Musa, not only did he have many narrations, but he was very good in his narrations as well. He was very good in his narrations as well. The students of Imam Abu Dawood. From the most famous of his students was his son Abdullah. Now, this is something we didn't mention in the Hayya of Ibn Abi Dawood, but this is something that we'll bring up now. Imam Abu Dawood, he actually went on to criticize his son later on in his life. He said, my son is a liar and do not take hadith from him. Do not take hadith from him. And when you talk about like drama in the family, you don't get like bigger drama than that, subhanAllah. What we want to look at is, did Imam Abu Dawood actually say this about his son, and what was the context behind this? What was the context behind this? So, let's start off about what we know about Abdullah. Abdullah accompanied his father pretty much everywhere that he went. In fact, a lot of the times, he eliminated his father from the chain of narration. Not as a sign of disrespect, but just to have a shorter chain of narration directly to the teacher, right? And that shows that he was a trustworthy man. He also compiled that poem of Aqidah that we discussed, which we said was one of the first poems written in Aqidah, if not the first poem written in Aqidah. Yes, please feel free, inshallah. Which was one of the first poems in Aqidah. So we know him to be righteous, we know him to be a great Imam, and in fact, some of the scholars of the past even mentioned that we preferred Abdullah over his father. We preferred Abdullah over his father. Now, this narration of, Imam Abu Dawood saying that my son is a liar, do not take from him, this is mentioned later on in the life of Imam Abu Dawood and later on in the life of his son. Something clearly took place between his father and him that potentially could have caused him to say this. The famous scholar of today, Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Abbad, he commented on this by saying, I did a study and a research on all of the narrations that can be alluded to Imam Abu Dawood saying this about his son, and either they are not authentic or they're found in dubious sources. Meaning that books of the people of Bid'ah, they're the ones that will mention this. Now, why would the people of Bid'ah mention this? To discredit his son Abdullah, particularly from the poem that was written, saying that, look, why would we accept this poem from someone that isn't trustworthy to begin with? So this is, the conclusion of Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Abbad, that that narration about his son Abdullah, where he says, my son is a liar, do not take from him, are actually not authentic, that this situation did not actually took place. And then he says, even if it did take place, then we say that this was a personal matter between him and his father, because the rest of the scholars of hadith considered him trustworthy. The rest of the scholars of hadith considered him trustworthy, and even then we considered his son Abdullah from his top students. Number 2, and the second individual that you should know from the students of Imam Abu Dawood is Abu Ubaid al-Ajurri. This al-Ajurri is not the famous scholar of hadith al-Ajurri. This is another Ajurri that is from the students of Imam Abu Dawood. What's unique about Abu Ubaid al-Ajurri is that he developed something from Abu Dawood, which Abu Dawood did with Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, which was Imam Abu Dawood, he compiled a book called Su'alat li Imam Ahmad, the questions that were put forth to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. And in these questions, Jazakallahu khair, Barakallahu fiqh. Yeah. In these questions, we learned some very valuable lessons. So let me pose one of these questions to you right now. Abu Dawood, he asked Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, what if a Christian woman has the son of a Muslim man inside of her and they both pass away? Where should this body be buried? Now understand what the ikhtilaf is about. The woman is Christian, the child inside of her is Muslim. Is she buried with the non-Muslims? Is she buried with the Muslims? What should happen?
So if it's after the 40 days and the Muslim blown into it,
yeah,
you would bury in the Muslim one, because you won't take that honor away from the child, right? Because it still is Muslim at that point. And if the mother died before the 40 days, you bury in the Christian one, because even though it's...
Okay, so let's make the discussion shorter. Let's just say it is after 40 days. Why?
Because the soul has been blown in, right? And if the child takes on the religion of the father, if the father is a Muslim in this case,
But then why would you bury a non-Muslim woman in the Muslim graveyard?
because you wouldn't take that right away from the child, right?
So why do we give the woman a more right than she deserves?
It's the honor of the Muslim inside. This doesn't make sense. You take the honor from a Muslim child away and take it away from the Muslims' graveyard. Like, take him away from the Muslims and put him in a Christian graveyard.
It wouldn't make sense. I mean, you have fiqh in one area, but you're lacking fiqh in a completely different area. But a good answer, the good effort, mashallah. Khubayb, go ahead.
Me personally, it's I would say that when younger Jewish kids that have not had puberty passed away, or Christian kids, they were buried in their own graveyards. So the fact that this child is still on the fitrah, it is still similar that these children are also on the fitrah as well. They have.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you for a second. This child is still inside the womb of his mother.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're not talking about just the child itself. It's the child inside the womb of the mother. Where are these two people going to be buried?
Yes, I'm saying they should.
So you're eventually getting there.
Non-Muslim.
Sorry?
Non-Muslim graveyard.
So they'd be buried in a non-Muslim graveyard.
Yes, and that's just because the child is on fitrah still.
Uh-huh.
The woman is kafir.
Right.
When a young 6-month-year-old Jewish boy passes away,
Uh-huh.
he's still considered on fitrah, but he's still buried in Jewish graveyard, not in a Muslim cemetery.
Okay.
But in this case, it's the father that's a Muslim.
Okay.
Yes, but
Let's not start up a discussion over here. No, if you'll allow me, let me just point out that the flaw in your argument, being upon the fitrah and being upon Islam are not one and the same. The fitrah leads to Islam, and the Islam encompasses the fitrah, but Islam and the fitrah are not the same.
Yes,
but still, I appreciate your answer.
is there not a chance that the child does not grow up to be a Muslim?
There's always a chance for everything.
Yes,
Even though this child right now, is technically not a Muslim because it's not born yet,
Okay.
right? But we're still discussing the issue over here.
Okay.
Who else had their hand up? Go ahead.
I think the question is not good.
The question is not good. This is Abu Dawood asking Imam Ahmad rahimahullah.
How do we know is the side is a Muslim or not Muslim?
No. So the scenario is the father is a Muslim, the mother is a Christian. The mother died during her pregnancy with the Muslim father's baby inside of her stomach. How
do you know he's a Muslim inside?
Habibi, we're not talking about the person inside, we're talking about the father. The father was Muslim. That's what we're talking about. So should this woman be buried in the Muslim graveyard or the non-Muslim graveyard? That's what we're discussing. طيب. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he responded by saying that there's 3 opinions on this issue. He didn't explain what the 3 opinions were. Abu Dawood asked him, and which one is the strongest one? And he says that this woman should be buried at the very end of the Muslim graveyard where the non-Muslim graveyard begins. That is what should be done with this woman. And this shows us, it's not just a black and white issue, but there's actually fiqh behind it. That, coming back to the issue over here, that I wanted Sajjad to get out of him at least, was that in Islam, it's a lot easier to give someone a right that they do not deserve, rather than take away the right of something that they do deserve. So you had the answer, but the fiqh wasn't just there yet. Right? And this is part of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is part of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now what we were getting to over here, Imam Abu Dawood, he wrote this book called Su'alat li Imam Ahmad, which are the questions that he asked to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. And this is now in part of a larger collection of books called Masail Imam Ahmad, like the legal verdicts of Imam Ahmad, or the rulings that Imam Ahmad gave, which, if I'm not mistaken, about 3 or 4 years ago, it was done as a doctoral thesis at the University of Medina in about 13, 14 volumes, that all the different narrations of the Masail, they were put together and tahqiq was done of it. So now, Abu Ubaid al-Ajurri, he's done the same thing with Imam Abu Dawood. However, he didn't do, fiqh with him, but rather he talked about hadith and the more intrinsic science of ilal with Abu Dawood, more intrinsic science of ilal with Abu Dawood. So those are 2 main students of Imam Ahmad. 3rd student, Imam al-Tirmidhi. He was also a student of, those are 2 main students of Imam Abu Dawood. 3rd student of Imam Abu Dawood, Imam al-Tirmidhi. 4th student of Imam Abu Dawood, Imam al-Nasai. What's interesting about Imam al-Nasai is that, was Imam al-Nasai actually a student of Imam Abu Dawood or not? An-Nasa'i, as we'll come to talk about sometime in the future inshallah, he says in his collection of hadith, وَقَالَ أَبُو دَاوُد وَحَدَّثَنَا أَبُو دَاوُد. The Abu Dawud that he's referring to over here, is it actually Abu Dawud al-Sijistani that we're talking about today, or is it another Abu Dawud? And this is like one of the issues with kunyas. When you leave it just as a kunya and you don't define who it is, or a laqab or a particular characteristic that they may have had, it's almost impossible to tell. However, upon further research, it does seem that Imam al-Nasa'i, he did narrate from Abu Dawud. He did narrate from Abu Dawud. Another interesting thing about Imam Ahmad and Abu Dawud is that Abu Dawud rahimahullah, like his pride and joy, like you would ask someone, what is like your biggest achievement in life? When Abu Dawud was asked this question, what is like your big achievement? He said, I narrated one hadith to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Like one hadith he didn't know, I narrated it to him. And in Sunan Abi Dawud, when you actually find this hadith, in some of the versions you'll see وَحَدَّثْتُ هَذَا الْحَدِيث لِأَحْمَدِ ibn Hanbal, that and I narrated this hadith to Ahmad ibn Hanbal as like his big pride and joy, Now, in terms of the praise of the scholars for Imam Abu Dawud, very, very interesting praises. I want to share these with you, and subhanallah, it really puts things into perspective how blessed the scholars of hadith were. So the first one is one of the scholars of hadith by the name of Musa ibn Harun. Inshallah, you can't forget this. Musa ibn Harun, right? He says, خُلِكَ أبو داود في الدنيا للحديث وفي الآخرة للجنة زاد الذهبي وغيره وما رأيت أفضل منه. That Musa ibn Harun, he said, Abu Dawud was created in this dunya for hadith, and he was created in the akhirah for paradise. And al-Dhahabi and others than him, they added on this narration by saying, we have not seen anyone better than him. We have not seen anyone better than him in the science of hadith. We have not seen anyone better than him in the science of hadith. So this shows us that subhanAllah, like hadith came so naturally to Imam Abu Dawud that the scholars said that this was clearly what he was created for in this life and in the hereafter, to be from the people of paradise. Meaning that they're alluding to his level of piety, his level of worship, his level of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other praises for Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. Let's find another one that I had. There's an individual by the name of Muhammad ibn Ishaq as-Saghani. Muhammad ibn Ishaq as-Saghani. He said, "Ulina li Abi Dawood al-Hadith kama ulina li Dawood al-Nabi al-Hadid." That hadith came so easily to Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah, just like that the bending of metal came very easy to the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. Then Abu Hatim ibn Hibban, he said, وَأَبُو دَاوُد أَحَدَ أَئِمَّةِ الدُّنْيَا فِقْهًا وَعِلْمًا وَحِفْظًا وَنَسَكًا وَوَرْعًا وَإِتْقَانًا وَجَمَعَ وَصَنَّفَ وَذَبَّ عَنِ السُّنَنِ. So Abu Hatim ibn Hibban, one of the great scholars of hadith as well, he says Abu Dawood was from the major imams in this dunya of fiqh and knowledge and memorization and piety and proficiency, and he compiled and he authored and he protected the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Abdullah ibn Manda, one of the other great scholars of hadith and fiqh, he says أخرجوا وميزوا الثابت من المعلول والخطأ من الصواب أربعة البخاري ومسلم وبعدهما أبو داود السجستاني وأبو عبد الرحمن النسائي. He says that there were 4 individuals that compiled hadith and distinguished between that which is authentic from that which is has a weakness in it, and that which is a mistake from that which is correct, are 4 individuals, Al-Bukhari and Muslim, and then after them was Abu Dawud al-Sijistani and Abu Abdurrahman al-Nasa'i. From the other virtues of Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah was his relationship with the rulers, So he used to have a khadim, someone that used to serve him, who says, فصلينا المغرب إذا قرع الباب فإذا خادم يقول هذا الأمير أبو أحمد الموافق أخو الخليفة آنذاك يستأذن فدخلت إلى أبي داود فأخبرته بمكانه فأذن له فدخل وقعد ثم أقبل عليه أبو داود وقال ما جاء بالأمير في مثل هذا الوقت قال خلال 3. قال وما هي؟ قال تنتقل إلى البصرة فتتخذها وطنا ترحل إليك طلبة العلم من أقطار الأرض. قال هذه واحدة، هات الثانية. قال تروي لأولادي كتاب السنن. قال نعم. هات الثالثة. قال تفرد لهم الرواية فإن أولاد الخلفاء لا يقعدون مع العامة. قال أما هذه فلا سبيل إليها فإن الناس شريفهم ووضيعهم في العلم سواء. قال ابن جابر فكانوا يحضرون بعد ذلك ويقعدون ويضرب بينهم وبين الناس ستر فيسمعون مع العامة. So the servant of Imam Abu Dawood, he says that we prayed Maghrib together one day when someone knocked on the door. And when he checked to see who it was the brother of the Khalifa. It was the brother of the Khalifa. So he told Abu Dawood, who was here, and Abu Dawood welcomed him in, and he, embraced him, and he asked him, what is it that's bringing you this late in the night to my house? And he says, there's three things. The first of them is that I want you to move to Basra. I want you to move to Basra. So Imam Abu Dawood rahimahullah, he is in Baghdad at this time with Imam Ahmad when this is taking place. So he's being told to move to Basra. Why should he move to Basra? Because it is a land through which the students of knowledge will come and travel to you. Meaning that Imam Abu Dawood, look, there's already Imam Ahmad, there's already other scholars in Baghdad. Why don't you move to Basra now? So that Basra can become a capital of learning as well, just like Baghdad was. So he says, fine, I will do whatever you say. Then he says, give me the second thing that you want. He says, I want you to teach my children your book As-Sunan, the Sunan of Abu Dawood. I want you to teach it to my children. He says, fine, no problem. He says, give me the third. And he says, the third thing I want you to do is, I want you to teach my children privately. I want you to teach my children privately. Because the children of the Khulafa, they don't sit with the laymen. They don't sit with the laymen. Then Imam Abu Dawood rahimahullah, he says, as for this, then this is something that is not going to be possible. Because the noblest of people and the lowest of people, when it comes to seeking knowledge, they all become equal. They all become equal. And Ibn Jabir, who was the Khadim, he says that after that, the children of the Khalifa and his brother, they used to come and they used to sit with the laymen at that time. They used to sit with the laymen at that time. What story does this remind you of? It should remind you of someone who we previously discussed. No.
Imam Malik and the Khalifa.
Imam Malik and the Khalifa.
Similar incident. They said the knowledge is...
I'll make it simpler. Someone that we discussed previously.
I know a similar situation. That in history.
No, I'm for someone that we discussed previously. Imam al-Bukhari went through two fitnas in his life. What were the two fitnas? Sorry? Are you making this up? I don't know what you're talking about.
Was one like the creation, was the Qur'an created, or?
Fantastic. That was one fitna. What was the second fitna?
He was blind.
No.
Was the ghost
left alone?
No, he was left alone. No. His second fitna was with the Khalifa himself. One, the Khalifa was from the Dhuhali family, right? That was one issue. Number two is that the Khalifa wanted Imam al-Bukhari to come and teach his children Sahih al-Bukhari. He wanted his children to learn Sahih al-Bukhari from Imam al-Bukhari, but he wanted Imam al-Bukhari to come to his house. And then what did Imam al-Bukhari respond at that time? He says, people humble themselves to knowledge, and knowledge does not humble itself in front of anyone. Knowledge does not humble itself in front of anyone. And this is similar to what Imam Abu Dawood is saying, that you can take the noblest of people, you can take the lowest of people. When it comes to seeking knowledge, they become equal. When it comes to seeking knowledge, they become equal. So from the praises of Imam Abu Dawood rahimahullah is that he was not afraid of taking a stance towards the rulers. He was not afraid of taking a stance towards the rulers. Now, what we want to discuss is the Sunan of Abi Dawood itself, the actual Sunan of Abi Dawood itself. Now, when you look at the books that Imam Abu Dawood authored, he's authored quite a few books. He has the Sunan of Abi Dawood, he has a book called Al-Marasil, which is an introduction to the narrations that are missing individuals in between people. He had another book called a letter to the people who denied Qadr, a letter to the people who denied Qadr. What we want to look at is a letter called Risala ila Ahli Makkah, a letter to the people of Makkah, in which he described his Sunan Abi Dawood. So in this letter to the people of Makkah, he describes to them why he wrote Sunan Abi Dawood, what was the objective behind it, the number of hadith, and his methodology in writing the Sunan Abi Dawood. So that is a book that he wrote, which is integral to studying the Sunan of Abu Dawood, which is integral to studying the Sunan of Abu Dawood. First, how did Imam Abu Dawood choose the hadith that he chose, and how many of them were there? Imam Abu Dawood, he said, I had compiled 500,000 hadith from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of which I chose 4,800. Of which I chose 4,800 of those hadith. Now, what's interesting is that when you look at the modern day version of Abu Dawood, you'll find in it 5,274. Who can tell me why there's a discrepancy? Imam Abu Dawood himself says, I put 4,800 hadith, and when you look at the modern day version of it, you find 5,274. Yeah.
Would it be the hadith with the same matan but different chains?
Fantastic. So certain hadith are repeated. So not in terms of different chains of narration, but certain hadith are repeated. So then the one that has a higher number, it's counting the repetition, whereas the 400,800 is not including the repeated hadith. There's a second reason as well. Yeah.
You can use different chains of narration to grant authority to someone that they believe to be weak.
No.
It strengthens the narrator, and then the hadith is.
No. Why would there be a discrepancy? Yeah.
Maybe some hadiths are fortunate or completion of others, like hadith Qur'an, in the sense that they
Good guess, but
not Imam decided, but afterwards they actually, whoever authored the book or compiled actually stood hadith.
good guess, but no, that's not it. Last
When he
one.
compiled the book, are they all authentic hadith from his opinion?
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
I guess if they're not, then maybe he's just counting
He's counting the authentic hadith, and they include all the weak hadith as well. No, that's not it. So the discrepancy actually takes place in the narrators of hadith. So when Imam Abu Dawood, he compiled this, people narrated this hadith from him, right? He didn't just say, hey, here's my Abu Dawood, it's a copy for you, but rather he would read it out to his students, and his students would write it down. So depending on the version of the hadith the version or the amount of halaqat that you attended from Abu Dawood is how many hadith you're actually going to narrate from him. So if you actually missed any halaqat, your version is going to be a lot shorter than someone that attended everything. Then that will continue based upon their students as well. If their students missed any halaqat, the version is going to keep getting shorter and shorter. So the version of Abu Dawood that is most renowned is the version of Ibn Dasa, and that is the one that has 5,274, and that is the one that if you take out all of the repeated hadith, inshallah should come out to 4,800, as Imam Abu Dawood is suggesting. What's interesting is that in his letter to the people of Mecca, he says, كتبت عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم 500,000 حديثا انتخبت ما ضممنته وجمعت في كتابي هذا 4,000 حديثا و800 حديث من الصحيح وما يشبهه ويقاربه ويكفي الإنسان لدينه من ذلك 4 أحاديث. So he says, after he says I had 500,000 hadith, of which I took 4,800 hadith, he says, and from those 4,800 hadith, 4 of them will suffice you from the rest. 4 of them will suffice you from the rest. Number 1, إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Number 2, من حسن الإسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. That from the best of one's Islam is leaving that which does not concern him. Number 3 is لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That none of you will truly believe till he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. And then the 4th hadith is الحلال بين والحرام بين. So he says that these 4 hadith will suffice an individual from the rest of the hadith that are in there. From the rest of the hadith that are in there. Now, here's something interesting. These 4 hadith over here, what does it remind you of? Something else that we've discussed in the past. These 4 hadith should remind you of something else. 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, very good. It should remind you of that. So what, 3 out of the 4 hadith are in there? Actually, no, all of them are in there. All of them are. So all of the hadith are in Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith. That's very good, but that's not what I'm looking for. Go.
Each hadith makes a fourth of Islam, someone said something like that.
Yes, each hadith makes a fourth of Islam. This is sort of what Abu Dawood is alluding to over here. Go ahead, Khubayb.
Oh, I was about to say something, but it's quite obvious. Some hadith are found in Bukhari Muslim.
Okay, inshallah khair. Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, he said that all of akhlaq revolves around 4 hadith. All of akhlaq revolves around 4 hadith. From those 4 hadith, 2 of them are actually mentioned over here. That none of you love for your brother what you love for yourself. That none of you will truly believe till you love for your brother what you love for yourself. And from the best of one's Islam is leaving that which does not concern you. Then he added 2 more hadith, which were whoever believes in Allah and the last day should speak good and remain silent. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he was asked for advice and he said, do not get angry, do not get angry, do not get angry. Now, someone do some, what's the word I'm looking for? Deduction between the 4 hadith Abu Dawood mentions and the 4 hadith that Ibn Abi Zayd mentions. What can we analogically deduce from these 4 hadith? It is late in the evening, man, and it's not even that late. Go ahead.
The 4 hadith of Imam Dawood,
yeah.
They both, 2 of them have to do with the rights of Allah and the other ones have to do with the rights of the people. Because the first one is like all actions are intentions.
Okay.
And there was a second hadith, what was it?
How did
all actions are by intention. The second one was that
from the best of one's Islam is leaving that which does not concern you. Never mind. No. Inshallah khair.
Rights of people versus rights of Allah.
Okay, so I will make it easier for you guys again, inshallah. The point being that since there's an overlap between the whole religion of Islam, which is what Abu Dawood is suggesting, versus all of akhlaq, what does it teach you? That more than half of the deen is good akhlaq. Half of the deen is good akhlaq. And this is something that the scholars of the past clearly understood. And that is why they would say that we learned akhlaq before we learned the hadith. We would learn, iman before we would learn the Qur'an. So there was a very heavy emphasis on good akhlaq, which is what every Muslim needs to understand. That before you start studying knowledge, your akhlaq needs to be on par. Because bad akhlaq will make the knowledge ugly, whereas good akhlaq will make the knowledge even more beautiful inside the individual. So a reason why people would reject knowledge from a person is due to the lack of akhlaq. And people will love a person even if he doesn't have much knowledge, but he implements the knowledge that he has, and he has good akhlaq. So this is the importance of akhlaq. This is the importance of akhlaq. Other things that we find about Abu Dawood rahimahullah in his Sunan that we will discuss is the methodology that Imam Abu Dawood took in compiling the Sunan. So in his letter to the people of Makkah, as we discussed, he writes his objective. His objective behind compiling Sunan Abu Dawood was every single hadith that the scholars of fiqh have used as a form of proof, he wanted to compile it together in one place. So every hadith that scholars of fiqh have used to develop a ruling in fiqh, he wants to compile it in one place. So that is the objective behind Sunan Abi Dawud. That is the objective behind Sunan Abi Dawud. Second thing that he mentions, every hadith that I have mentioned in Sunan Abi Dawud is salih. Now this is where a lot of difference of opinion occurs. When Abu Dawud mentions that every hadith I have mentioned is salih, what does it mean? Does it mean that the hadith is salih or salih lil ihtijaj? That it is sound within of itself, or it is sound to be used as a proof? It is sound to be used as a proof. When you study Sunan Abi Dawud itself, what the conclusion you come to is every hadith inside Sunan Abi Dawud is definitely not authentic. However, it can be authentic enough to use as a proof. Authentic enough to use as a proof. Now, people may be questioning, how is it possible that a hadith is not authentic, but it is authentic enough to use as a proof? So, going back to the objective that Abu Dawud had, he wanted to use every single narration that the scholars of fiqh used to develop a ruling on. So now, what if the scholars are basing their ruling based upon a weak hadith? Who can give me an example of this? The scholars basing their ruling upon using a weak hadith. There's a very famous example.
It's better to have a nail driven through your head if you shake the palms of a woman. Because the hadith itself is weak, but there's other evidences that link to that hadith right there.
I need something more explicit. And it's particular to the Sunan of Abi Dawud. Out of all of the Imams, he was the only one to mention this hadith. A particular salah. Oh man, come on. Tasbih, fantastic. So Salatul Tasbih is only reported by Sunan Abi Dawud. And you have a question or a comment?
Both.
If it's a comment about Salatul Tasbih, go ahead.
Isn't it considered weak?
I'm just getting to that right now if you would allow me to finish.
Okay.
So, since Abu Dawood mentioned this hadith, and they looked at the risala that he wrote to the people of Mecca, saying that every hadith I mentioned is salih, people assume that Imam Abu Dawood, the reason he mentioned this is because he considered the hadith to be salih. But in reality, this is not the case. He mentioned this hadith for the fact of this is the only hadith that can be found to establish its authenticity. It's an individual hadith that is not shared by a lot of people, and in reality it is a weak hadith. In reality it is a weak hadith, and that is why the other Imams of hadith did not mention it. But why did Imam Abu Dawood mention it over here? It is salih lil-ihtijaj, to prove that look, this is the only hadith found in the chapter and this is what they're basing it upon. Do I necessarily agree? No. How did Imam Abu Dawood give that disclaimer? Through a simple principle, that when you mention your isnad, the burden of responsibility is no longer upon you. The burden of responsibility is no longer upon you. You only have the burden of responsibility of conveying what is authentic from what is not authentic if you don't mention the isnad, if you do not mention the isnad. Now, there's another point over here, is that Imam Abu Dawood, he says, I did not quote anyone that there was ijma' that he was matruk. So meaning that anyone who is by consensus to be abandoned, I didn't take any of their narrations from them. I did not take any of their narrations from them. So he did have weak narrators in his sunan, but it was done intentionally. It was done intentionally, right? That if he couldn't find another more authentic hadith, then he would use some of their narrations. But anyone that was, by consensus weak, he would not include them in his book. He would not include them in his book. What else did I want to share with you guys? Then everything else is just, technicalities about Sunan Abi Dawood. Everything else is technicalities about Sunan Abi Dawood. Let's talk about the fiqh of Abu Dawood. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, when he comments on the 6 Imams of Hadith, he said 2 of them were mujtahids and 4 of them were upon the madhab of Ahlul Hadith. Which ones were which? Who were the 2 mujtahids and who were the upon the madhab of Ahlul Hadith? Bukhari and Muslim. Good guess, but that is not correct.
No.
No.
Not even one.
You said 2 mujtahid, 2 Ahlul Hadith.
No, 2 mujtahid, and the rest of the 4 Imams were on the madhab of Ahlul Hadith.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Imam Bukhari is a mujtahid.
Yes.
And Abu Dawud is a mujtahid.
Fantastic. Did you just come to that conclusion?
No, I think I knew.
You think you knew it? That is the answer. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he says the 2 mujtahids out of the group were Imam al-Bukhari and Abu Dawood, and the rest of the 4 Imams of Hadith were upon the madhab of Ahlul Hadith, were upon the madhab of Ahlul Hadith. And this is something that you will see inside Sunan Abi Dawood, that even though he accompanied Imam Ahmad rahimahullah a lot of the times, and a lot of his fiqh opinions are taken from Imam Ahmad's madhab, he did not, restrict himself to the madhab. But a lot of the times when he found the opinion incorrect, he would go on and give his own opinion. He would go on and give his own opinion. Which leads us back to something that I forgot in his risala to the people of Mecca. He mentions that he would prefer a weak hadith over the opinion of an individual, So in a situation where he can't find anything except for a weak hadith and the opinion of an individual, he would abandon the opinion of the individual and use the weak hadith instead. So that was from the fiqh of Imam Abu Dawood, that Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah considered him to be from the mujtahids of the Imams, meaning that he was worthy of having his own madhab and worthy of making ijtihad. Another interesting thing about Abu Dawood is that he talks about his interesting experiences. When he went to Egypt, he says, I saw in Egypt 2 things I have never seen in my life before. And even when reading this, I find this, I have trouble believing it, but since the Imam said it, inshallah we will believe it due to him being trustworthy. He says, I saw a cucumber that was 13 feet long. A cucumber that was 13 handspans long. Now, you're like, what's so interesting about that? This is like living in a time where you have no hormones are being, injected into the fruits. There's none of that stuff. How do you get a cucumber that's 13 feet long? So that was the first strange thing he saw. The second strange thing that he mentions is that he saw 2 citrus fruits that were the size of camel humps when they were split in half. So you know how big a camel hump is? Imagine an orange when it's cut into half, that's how big it was. So those are from the strange things that Abu Dawood mentions that he saw in his trip to Egypt. Then Abu Dawood rahimahullah, I think let's conclude with his death. He passed away in the year 275. He passed away in the year 275. I just want to make sure I have that correct, if I'm not mistaken. 275 on the 16th of Shawwal. That is how he passed away. We do not have details as to how he passed away or what exactly happened. But we do know is that he spent his last days teaching hadith. We spent his last days teaching hadith. And that is how he had spent the vast majority of his life.
Where did he die?
In Basra. He died in Basra, 16th of Shawwal. Go ahead.
So, did he study under Imam Ahmad during the fitna, or was it after the fitna?
So during the time of the fitna, Imam Ahmad was imprisoned, right? So obviously it was next to impossible to have studied with him at that time. But this is before the fitna and after the fitna.
So what was his stance? Like, did he do anything during the fitna or no?
Abu Dawood himself, Allahu Alam. Abu Dawood himself, I don't know. Allahu Ta'ala Alam. But we do know, actually, Wallahu Alam, I don't know. One thing I did want to comment on was this book over here. So when I do my research in Arabic, I always compare it to what's available in the English language. And this series is actually a very, very good series. Like, it's a biography of the 6 Imams of Hadith, along with other luminaries of Hadith as well. So you have Sufyan Thawri, you have Sheikh Albani rahimahullah, you have a couple of other people who I don't remember as well. For the most part, I didn't like what they did with Imam Muslim. I didn't like what they did with Imam al-Tirmidhi. Imam al-Bukhari is good because there's a lot of stories that you won't find in other places. And out of the whole series, the one about Abu Dawood is actually the best one for several reasons. Number one is that as there isn't much information about his actual life itself, they brought the necessary information about his life. Number two, commentary on his fiqh is quite detailed. So you'll bring actual hadith from Sunan Abi Dawud with the commentary that Abu Dawud gave on Dawud's hadith to show his actual fiqh. And then number three, in terms of hadith, when Imam Abu Dawud gave commentary on certain narrators, he brings those narrations and shows the commentary to show how knowledgeable Abu Dawud was in hadith as well. Most importantly, it talks about issues of aqidah. Now, we were just discussing the issue of the fitna. Where did Abu Dawud stand? Clearly, Abu Dawud stood with Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. Did he vocalize his stance? Did he go through any particular trials? That is something I do not know of. I do not find in any of the books. But clearly affirmed the aqidah of Imam Ahmad. And there's a detailed discussion on refuting the Mu'tazila and their ideology. The people of Qadar, as we mentioned, Abu Dawud wrote a particular book refuting the people of Qadar. And there's a detailed discussion on that as well in this book. So if you buy any book of the series, I would suggest this is the one to get. This was like the best one that I found out of the series so far. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We'll take questions and then call it a day, inshallah. Go ahead.
You mentioned 2 reasons why Imam said the hadith of 4,800.
Yeah.
And in modern days, more than
5274, yeah.
Correct. One of them, the reason said could be repetitions.
So the repetitions were counted, yes. Second is the difference of narrations of Abu Dawud. So Abu Dawud had different narrations. Like all of the famous books of hadith, like I said, they weren't handed to the students, here's the book, right? But rather the Imam would read the hadith to them and the students would write the hadith down. So if anyone missed a halaqah, they missed a hadith if they didn't catch it from someone else. So when you look at the different versions of the students that narrated from Abu Dawud, that is where the discrepancy could take place. That some of them would have less, some of them could have more based upon that.
So then the addition of about 900 hadith.
5274.
52, it's about 400 hadith.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Imam taught his student all of the 4,800, for example.
Right.
Then he conveyed on. How can they increase, maybe, if they taught exactly the same amount? That's my question.
So how can they increase? One is that if they when they were counting the hadith, they included the mukarrarat, those that are repeated. Number two is that one of the things that Abu Dawud mentions is that he took only the shahid from the hadith itself. So there's a longer version of the hadith and he only included the shahid. So now what the student could have done is that he included a longer version of the hadith with the shahid within of itself. So this would include, it's mentioning the hadith twice as well. So this would increase the number of the hadith as well. Wallahu alam. Basically what he's saying is that like three things are being combined together. Number one is that he gave preference to a weak hadith over the opinion of an individual.
Yes.
Number two is that all the hadith that he mentioned are salih lil-ihtijaj, that they're for argument's sake you can use them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the hadith is authentic within of itself. And then number 3, to conclude the discussion, is as long as the chain of narration is there, the burden of proof is upon the person reading it and not the person conveying it.
But how sound is this argument though? I mean,
nowadays it's not very powerful at all. I could give you, like, anyone could be given a chain of narration, they're like, what do I do with this, right? But as someone like Abu Dawood, and understanding who he's presenting the book to is very, very powerful. That, hey, I've given you the chain of narration, you do your due diligence now. That, why are you even studying my book if you don't know who the narrators are?
but I mean, like, for instance, like when we compare, like, for example, Abu Dawood to Imam Bukhari.
Yeah.
Imam Bukhari made sure that the chain of narration, there was no break or no gap. Why was Abu Dawood not as thorough on this point?
So the issue of here isn't being thorough, it's about what is the objective behind writing the book. So Imam al-Bukhari, he wanted to compile everything that was authentic. Imam Abu Dawood, he wanted to compile all the proofs that the scholars of fiqh use to justify their fiqh opinions, right? And a lot of the times it is weak hadith. So he would choose the strongest out of the weak hadith that he could find and include it in his sahih. Okay. Include it in his sunan.
Okay.
وياك. تفضل.
Any idea how many weak hadiths included in this?
Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wallahu ta'ala alam. I had the number, but I don't remember it offhand. Inshallah, maybe if I check my notes inside the office, I'll be able to give you the exact number. Wallahu ta'ala alam. One of the good things about the English versions now is that they'll actually give you the ruling on the hadith itself. So when you look at the English version, there it has the ruling on the hadith inside of it. Khair. We'll conclude with that. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.